We're back with Cade Courtley, former Navy SEAL, TV star, and author. So, how do you go from Navy SEAL to a Hollywood career? Is that like, did that just land? Did it kind of happen? What?
It did. It was kind of random. So when I did 9 years active duty, and my last command was in San Diego as a senior SEAL instructor. So it kind of went full circle from going to SEAL training to being a senior SEAL instructor. And the problem with being an officer in SEAL teams, at about the 9-year mark, it's sort of like, well, you're not going out with the boys anymore. And that's what I wanted to do in the SEAL teams. I had no aspirations for being an admiral. I didn't want to go to DC. I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to go out and I wanted to lead the ops. So that's the point as an officer where you're like, all right, it's probably time to go on, try something different. So I got a random phone call from this guy. You may have heard of him. His name's Mark Burnett. He's gone on to be pretty successful guy, right? Well, this is back when Mark had just finished his first episode of Survivor.
Okay.
And Mark, being former military, wanted to put together a version of Survivor, but he wanted to do it with ex-military and ex-law enforcement where we compete against each other.
Okay.
And the Navy said, hey, you can't use anybody who's active duty. So he was calling guys that just got out that still had really good skill set. So I get a call from Mark. He's like, hey, you want to come out and do this TV show for a month in Victorville? It's going to be fun. You know, you're going to screw around and we're going to reenact all these old ops that happened. You're going to compete. And at the time, I'd gotten accepted to go to University of Southern California to get my MBA and hopefully make some money. And so I said, well, I got a month off. Why not?
Yeah.
So, damn Mark Burnett, he's like, man, you're good in front of the camera. You need to come out to Hollywood and do that. And I should have said, well, are you gonna pay me? you gonna cover my bills? So I literally loaded up the U-Haul, drove up to Hollywood thinking I was going to be a big star. And let's just say that Hollywood is a whole different ball game because I went from every day I went to work, I trusted people with my life, to Hollywood where
I wouldn't trust people with my backpack.
So I don't know if somebody's ringing my doorbell, but they're just not awake.
You need the ring system so you can pick it up from your phone.
Yeah.
So
I got the Jehovah's Witnesses out there trying to convert me, and I'm just like, man, no, that sorry, buddy, that ship sailed. See you next week.
So how did you handle the transition going from, like you said, being in a position where everybody you were around, you essentially could trust your life with, to now being in an environment where everybody around you is literally, in many ways, are not trying to usurp your life in some sense or form?
Well, to be honest with you, that was one of the most difficult challenges I ever had. I mean, I thought going through buds with multiple broken legs was tough.
Yeah.
But when mentally you go from having a team that's like your family, a mission, you're being challenged every day, and you're surrounded by excellence, to a business that's business model is, it isn't worth it unless we're screwing you over. Tough. I mean, but it was my choice.
Yeah.
This was my choice. So I can't blame anybody for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the best quote I ever heard was from Sam Jackson. And he said, man, I love the work, but I hate the business. And the work was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I started off doing stunt work, which is kind of a natural progression for a SEAL. Uh-huh. And then I guess they figured out, hey, this guy can make complete sentences and he's very articulate. So I got in front of the camera, and it didn't take long for me to realize, hey, man, you suck as an actor, so let's try something else.
What was the hardest thing about trying to become an actor or acting, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it was weird. So the first audition I ever went to was for this TV show called Jag.
Uh-huh.
And Jag was like this. It was Navy lawyers.
Yeah.
And the part was for a Navy SEAL platoon commander. So, I mean, if I can't land that role, then I should have packed up the U-Haul and gone and sold used cars. But somehow I got that. And the funny thing about Hollywood is there's this little carrot out there. And just when you're ready to fold it up, you get a little bite of that carrot and you're like, all right, I'll stick around.
Yeah.
But what really worked for me with Hollywood was the fact that, hey, I mean, you've done some pretty cool stuff. You ever think about writing? So I ended up spending the next 3-4 years as a screenwriter, and had some really good success with that. I was able to sell 4 scripts. One of them got produced, and I said, yeah, okay, this is pretty cool. But at the end of the day, if you can't look yourself in the mirror, then you need to change what you're doing. And I just did not like the way they did business there.
Yeah.
So I decided, all right, man, let's move on.
Yeah. What was that process like in terms of screenwriting? Because it seems so general, but then also very mythic at the same time. You know, because I'm just a different type of style of writing.
Well, I mean, I'm still not going to be a Jehovah's Witness. Please leave me alone.
Those might be the Mormons.
No, I apologize for that. What I was always told is that if you can tell a real story. Now my dogs. Now they're trying to convince my dogs to do jokes. Real is always better. Okay. Hacksaw Ridge. I don't know if you got a chance to see that movie.
Say it again.
Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw Ridge. No, I haven't actually.
Okay. Real story. And so if you don't have to make something up that happened that was amazing, that's a great screenplay. That's going to be a great movie. So what I brought to the table when I started screenwriting was just stuff I really did. And people seem to dig it. Yeah. So I started bringing that to the table. But I wasn't very good at playing the game. Yeah. And so when I got some guy who's 24 years old, and probably the scariest thing he's ever had to do was change a tire, and he's sitting there telling me how I need to adjust my screenplay, I was like, yeah, probably not a good fit. And again, that's when I decided, all right, let's go try something else. I mean, it was fun. I had a good time. I had some pretty cool experiences, but you know, again, like I said earlier, if you can't look yourself in the mirror and be like, hey, I'm okay with what I see, yeah, that was my
probably a good time to.
That was my moral. That was my moral compass, and so I decided to move on.
Awesome. Now, so then I'm assuming at some point you became an author.
I did.
And so, what your book? What kind of sparked the topic of the book, and what am I, as a person who's reading it, what am I to take away from it as just kind of being someone who has no prior military background, no law enforcement background, nothing. I'm just your average everyday civilian.
That's exactly how I confronted writing this book. So the last thing I did in Hollywood was I did a TV series called Surviving Disaster. And that was a show on Spike TV where we picked like 10 natural and man-made disasters that could happen to anybody. It could happen to you, me, my sister, whoever's bugging me at the front door. They're confronted by this. And I went through a very sort of like, almost like a checklist, like a pilot would go through and be like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 for somebody who has little or no training, but is going to be able to endure that situation. And that was the approach I took with my book, The SEAL Survival Guide. And I spent most of my time with that first chapter talking about a mindset, pushing your comfort zone, being aware of your surroundings, a basic foundation so that when you find yourself, wow, we've got a hurricane that's about 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
I've got all these basics, and now I can go through the checklist of the SEAL Survival Guide, and I'm going to have a pretty damn good chance of getting through this. And that's how I wrote that book.
Gotcha. And what do you see commonly as the weakest aspect of your everyday person's ability to be, one, prepared for such a disaster? Like, what's the most common mistake?
2 things. Number 1, not thinking that this is something that'll ever happen to me, instead of, if this happens to me, what am I going to do? And then number 2 is just a sense of being aware of your surroundings. If you're in an airport, if you're in a shopping mall, you're overseas, that's not when you're sitting there doing selfies and texting. That's when you put your phone in your pocket and you keep your head on a swivel. You're surrounded by people you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what their intentions are. And if you see something that doesn't make sense, or if all of a sudden you see a guy with a trench coat and out comes an AK-47, you're going to buy that that second or two.
Yeah.
That's going to be the difference between life and death.
Gotcha. One quick question before we go, and then, well, I'm going to have you plug your book and let everybody know where they can get it. But something came to mind when you brought up the whole notion of the guy with the trench coat and pulling out the AK. Considering you were SEAL, I'm pretty sure you've been in situations where somebody else has had a gun. But for me, I've always had this thought process that goes through my mind in terms of dealing with that time period. And there's a word for it, I'm just not using it. That time period between me seeing what's happening and then my brain clicking in and saying, this is actually really happening. And then being able to put myself in a position to react accordingly. From your experience, especially considering your military background, what do you know to be the best way to kind of deal with that, so to speak?
Well, look, there's 3 responses that people have when confronted with some type of a crisis. So you're outside, you're on the street, and you start hearing gunshots. You're going to fight, flight, or you're going to freeze. And I tell people, if you can remember these 2 things, you hear something like that, you get down, and you find cover. That's all you need to worry about for that first 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Get down, because you're making a smaller target, and then get behind something that will stop bullets. Okay? And then what you're doing is you're offering yourself time, the ability to come up with, now what am I going to do next? And it's called getting off the X. Okay. Boom. That just happened. Okay. I've got a few seconds of safety. Now what am I going to do next? Try and identify where that's coming from and figure out your next move, which generally speaking is going to be the opposite direction. That's also going to supply you cover. You might be in a position where that person's 5 minutes away. Mm-hmm. So how do you want to go out? Do you want to go out curled in a ball? Or are you going to go out like those guys did on that plane that went down outside of D.C. And just be like, all right, I've got my daughter, I've got my son, I've got my wife. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cover that 5 feet. I might take a couple of rounds, but you know what? I'm going to do it, and I'm going to save the people that matter most in my life. It's a bold move. It's, again, counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You don't run towards hazard, but think about what's important, man.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. with that being said, go ahead. This is plug your book time, and go ahead and let people know one title of the book and where they can find it.
Well, I tell you what, the title of the book is called The SEAL Survival Guide, and you can get that at SEALsurvival.com. But I've also gotten into the world of the entrepreneur, and my main course now is I started a coffee company.
Okay.
Because when I was overseas, coffee was probably more important than the Kevlar and the helmet, man. So I've started a coffee company. It's called Victory Coffee. It is the only award-winning, veteran-owned coffee company out there, and sure would appreciate any support. So just go to victorycoffees.com. Give us a try. It's good stuff, man. Like I said, we're saving lives.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely coffee runs my life right now. So
I'm sending you some.
All
right. I want your address.
All right. I have the producer send it over to you. All right. Thanks a lot, Cade. It was a great pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your service and everything that you've done thus far. And keep at it, man.
Hey, thanks for your time. I love your show. Keep it up, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. You have a good one. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to look at the latest guns from Eagle.